Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Winning Together webinar, where our panelists will unpack smarter account strategies for sales and customer success. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Travis, Vice President of Customer Experience at Altify, Karen, Chief Marketing Officer at Totango, as well as Chris, Senior Vice President of Global Customer Success. So without further ado, let's hand over to the people that you are here for today. And thank you to our panelists for joining us today. Handing over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole and Chris and Travis. I am really pumped for today's conversation. We've got a lot of good topics in store, but just to keep the audience and you on your toes, let's open it up with a little bit of a rapid fire round. We're going to play true or false. I know we love it depends. I know we love, well, it could be this or that, but I'm going to ask you both to commit to an answer, and then we'll dive into that in the discussion. So are you ready?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. True or false? Customer success and expansion are becoming a big part of account planning today.
That's very true. Yeah, true.
Infinitely true. Yes.
Keep on softballs. Keep on throwing the softballs.
Yeah, I like the easy ones.
Yeah.
Awesome. And please, audience, we'd love for you to play along in the chat as well. All right, next one. Commercial responsibilities are changing between sales and customer success teams.
Oh, yeah. Very true.
True.
Okay. How about health scoring? We talked about ER life and watching our favorite show, The Pit, on TV in our prep call. Health scoring needs to be more predictive of churn.
True.
Hard. Yeah, true. Hard one, but true. Yeah.
Okay. Businesses are reassessing the skills needed for people coming into the account management, sales, and CSM roles.
True.
True.
True. Oh my God.
True.
All right.
100%.
Final question. Expansion opportunities begin before the renewal.
I'm going to say true. 100%.
Yeah, I'm going to take it a step further. They begin before the original deal gets struck.
100%.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for playing along with that rapid fire round. Before we dive into the conversation, I'd love for the audience just to learn a little bit more about your roles at your company. As we just talked about, the roles and responsibilities are shifting in the post-sale org. So, Chris, let's start with you. Share a little bit about what's under your remit as SVP of Global Customer Success at Totango.
Yep. So thanks, Karen. Travis, great to be hanging out with you for the next hour and with the rest of the team here. Yes, at Totango, as the Senior Vice President of Global Customer Success, I'm over all things kind of post-sale in a typical CS fashion. So that would include implementation, or onboarding, support, customer success, and then I also partner with our sales team on renewals and expansion from that standpoint as well. So we have kind of a joint ownership when we get into that remit. But yeah, that's kind of the standard answer for customer success for me.
Awesome. And Travis, you're Vice President of Customer Experience at Upland Altify. So share a little bit about Upland Altify and your remit of VP of CX.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, Chris and I did not coordinate on black vests today. But very nice. Sorry, Karen, we didn't send you the memo.
Yeah.
So I run post sale for Altify, and for Altify, if folks don't know about it, we're essentially a blend between a consulting organization and a software company. So we help companies, usually very large enterprise sales organizations, drive and scale sales methodologies across their sales organizations. So we work in both the account planning and management space, as well as the deal execution, opportunity management space. And our expertise is really coming in and helping do these sales transformations to try to scale some best practice sales behaviors across, again, a lot of these large organizations. Think relationship strategies, better understanding of the customers, qualifying deals, understanding white space, hitting objectives and actions across your largest accounts, those sorts of things. So my remit is not too dissimilar to Chris. I have customer success as a part of my organization. We think of my organization as being customer experience, though, at Altify, where everybody that touches the customer daily ultimately reports up into me. So the consulting organization, we have phenomenal consultants based around the globe that are all former sales leaders that go in and teach the either our homegrown methodology or a customer's homegrown methodology or other methodologies. And then it's reinforced with the technology piece. And so on the technology side of the house, we have our implementation, our optimization teams, and we have our support team as well. And then, of course, renewals plays a part of my organization. And to Chris's point, we collaborate really closely with the sales team, both from making sure that we have really smooth handoffs and transitions from new logo into our organization, as well as when there's large expansion opportunities that we partner with the sales organization on those. Although some of that expansion actually is owned by us, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, definitely. Well, handoffs in particular is a hot topic, and winning together, the title of this webinar, that's really what it requires to have a successful expansion, is working to perfect and smooth those handoffs, or working hand in hand, if you will. So let's dive into the discussion. Now, this may not be new news to everyone, right? In today's world, we are seeing that retention and expansion, that upsell and cross-sell motion is the priority for growth, because the data is showing the sales cycles are taking longer. It's more challenging for reps to meet quotas. I just saw some astounding data recently from Forrester that B2B buying groups have now grown from 8 to over 22 people. And this is the one that really blew my mind. 9 of those so-called decision makers are external to the company. Now, we certainly see that if you're working within the enterprise, you might have an external consultant or advisor, but just really challenging environment for acquisition these days. So we see a lot of companies focusing on customer-led growth, or that retention and expansion motion. But the big question is, who is responsible? So when we talked about, commercial responsibilities changing between sales and customer success, or that post-sale org, how do you start identifying where that expansion opportunity lies, and then who's responsible for taking that over the line? So Chris, I'm going to start with you, post-sale leader, and how are you helping customer success teams navigate this shift every day?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, it is interesting, and one of the things that, as I've met with a lot of CS leaders and in the space, everybody's making this shift. Whether you're I was at a chief revenue officer summit last week, and it's the same thing. I mean, I think the stat was 65% of sales leaders are actually readjusting how their structure is organized within their team and what their remit is as it relates to kind of leaning into your install base, right? So we're seeing this over and over again. So, how to navigate that shift internally. I think one of the things that I've heard from a number of leaders and that I'm seeing is this kind of lean back to, I'm going to say back to basics of customer success. So as we think about the importance of the roles and responsibilities of working together on how we drive growth within the install base, having, a good, clear swim lanes for your CSM team and how they're going to be helping drive value and be insanely proactive as it relates to the overall health of the customer. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about health scores and all that good stuff later, but having a CS team that is working kind of lockstep with the sales team in that motion, whether that's a AE or an AEM or depending on your structure, but that's going to be something that's really key. And there's a number of aspects of that when we think about alignment with those teams. And how they're going to be able to support each other, which, can be different or tricky water for some folks. But, again, it's clear lines of communication. One of the things that we're seeing a lot is new formed RACs and new form kind of structures and how we approach supporting the customer through growth, post sale. And then the other thing, and then I'll hand it over to Travis to give his thought. But I mean, I've seen also that this is more than just sales and CS, right? There is sales or CS, there's marketing, there's product. Every aspect of the business now needs to lean in when we think about how we drive growth within our install base. It's not just a customer success function. It's not just a customer success and sales function. The market is tough, and for us to get the absolute most out of it and help support our customers well, we need to be leaning in significantly across the entire company. So,
yeah, and I love that point of view. We take on the same one. It's everybody sells, right? If you're a consultant, if you're a solution engineer, if you're in marketing, everybody sells. You have to. It's not going to get easier in the near term.
Nope.
And I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that I thought was really interesting there, Chris, was is the kind of changing profile of the CS of CS generally. And I can tell you that for us internally, we are hiring people that are more sales minded than ever before. And one of the things that we quite frankly have to adjust and change ourselves is how we compensate internally, because 5 years ago, we weren't really focused on, from a CS standpoint, the kind of expansion that we're expecting out of them now. And there's, I think, there's one really strong benefit that a lot of people don't always consider or talk about when it comes to the CS world and getting them into an expansion mindset. When you're in an expansion mindset, you don't get to the expansion unless the customer is really happy. And so you're more motivated to make sure that you've done the right thing for the customer and getting them to a place where they're healthy and they're happy. Talk about health scores. And once you get them to that point, then expansion happens organically. But if you're not there yet, you can't be there. So we want the sellers to be thinking, or we want the CS team to be thinking expansion, but you can't get there without the customer being healthy first. And I think that's a good thing. And it's a motivating thing for the CS team to make sure that the customer is healthy.
Yeah. One thing too, just to kind of riff on that, is, as we think about alignment cross-functionally and historically think, okay, well, I want, the CS team is not the happiness department. It is absolutely got to be the value realization department, right?
Yeah,
you can't expand a churning customer, so from a sales perspective, and we're doing this internally as well. It's like when we have our sales team and we're working on, account plans, and I know we're going to talk about account plans or value or success plans later, but like when we think about building out an account plan, the importance of understanding the root of what that customer is doing, why they bought us, and that we've got to map towards success for them as it relates to getting value out of the platform. That's not just a CS thing, because guess what? You can't, like you said, you can't expand a customer that's not, achieving value in your platform. And so foundationally, we have to make sure that, and you mentioned this in the intro, before they come in, we've got to have an understanding of what value looks like and how they're going to measure it. If we don't have that even prior to the sale, then we're already behind, right? Yeah. So it's critical to have that and then pull that thread all the way through implementation and then into success and value realization, so that way we can drive potential expansion. If you don't have what that is, then you're limiting your ability to expand the customer before you even sell them.
And the value could be quantitative or qualitative, but you do have to recognize it, memorialize it, and make sure that the customer completely understands that this is what you've provided for them. I mean, it could be, I got to grow revenue by X amount. I got to reduce operational costs by X amount. I have behavior change expectations across the organization that we have to document, and you guys are going to help us with. It can be any number of different goals or focuses, but that documentation of it, and then the communication of the success afterwards. Yeah, really, it's hard to scale that across organizations, but it's really
important. Yeah, and Karen, I have one other stat that I have to throw in that I swear I'll throw it back to you. But it's funny. Greg Danes, I guess it was about 1.5 years ago, did a big study on value realization and in the importance of tracking value measures. And he had a stat that said, if you're tracking and able to show realized value with a customer, they are 6 times more likely to renew, right? So significant. Now, the thing that was really interesting about that is even if you're tracking it and you're not showing realized value, so there, you don't necessarily, you haven't achieved it yet, but you're actually pointing to it, and as you said, memorializing it and kind of pushing towards that, they're still 2 to 3 times more likely to renew, right? So even if you're not getting there, taking that and like you said, memorialize, and I was like, oh, that's definitely the word, right? It's like making that front and center as we think about the conversations and how we are managing that customer journey and the customer through their life cycle with us. If we have that as the North Star, then we're going to do significantly better and maybe infinitely better, if we're able to achieve those milestones. So,
and you got to beat that drum over and over again. You got to let them know over and over again.
Yeah, definitely. That's making sure that everyone's crystal clear on that if there's business change, an executive change, some new initiative, you always have to check in on what those objectives are, how you're making progress. So definitely good to have. I like to think about it as kind of ongoing discovery, where you're constantly checking in and making sure that you're verifying what you initially thought was true of why they bought and why you sold. So
quite frankly, those parameters are changing a lot right now, particularly, and I hate to use the AI example, but I mean, IT organizations are getting a lot more power than they've ever had before. Even within our world, where sales leaders were the typical main buyer, IT is now becoming that main buyer. So even if when you started out your relationship with the customer and there were specific goals that decision maker had that you were aligned to, if you're not checking regularly, you might not realize that there's a new decision maker who's in a completely different department now, and they have completely different goals than what you started with, and you have to do some realignment to make sure that you're now supporting that decision maker's goals.
100%. And it is so funny too, because when I think about, I'm laughing at LinkedIn these days because every post starts with something is dead, right? So, it seems like that's all the rage, the clickbait, but QBRs have been evidently dead for a long time. And so the great part about a QBR, if you really think of, our business review, whether you do it quarterly or some other time frame, but that is the opportunity to do exactly what you just said, which is, hey, we got to make sure that we're continuing to either one, achieve the value and then we're banging that drum, or, if value has shifted, or if there's a new buyer, if there's a new person that's involved, it's like, okay, we need to understand what does value look like for them. Yeah. And it's a critical aspect of what we do when we're meeting with our customers and having, let's call it a value review, right? I mean, it's something that is consistent, that you're able to make sure that you're either level setting, you're moving in the right direction, or if there's a shift, you're shifting with whatever their business needs are.
Yep.
So that's a great segue. So we're talking about the LinkedIn trend of saying what's dead. I think I shared a post recently about, feeling like you've got a customer that's suddenly on life support and you're rushing like ER doctors to save them because something went wrong in your health score or in the parameters that you set up to determine whether or not a customer is achieving value, whether or not they're healthy. So let's talk about health scores. There's the manual, human derived, you can have multidimensional health scores, but AI and the boom of innovation there is really bringing a new breadth of signals and customer data to the fore to give leaders a little bit more of a predictive view. So, Chris, let's dive in just to kind of set the table for the crew. How should everyone be thinking about account score and health score? Are they the same thing? And then how do you think about evolving health scores to be more predictive?
Well, so it's interesting. Account scores and health scores are often kind of intermixed, when we think about it. And especially as we get into some of the benefits of AI and some of the predictive analytics that we'll talk a little bit more about, I think we'll see the lines kind of blur a little bit between those. I mean, generally speaking, an account score is more like a business relationship strength, right? So if we're thinking about, hey, are we aligned with the right people? Do we have the right executives, are we achieving value, and things like that are going to come more in the health score aspect of it, and usage and utilization and value realization. So, when I think of account score, just by its pure definition, it's more business strength. And, are they paying their bills, et cetera, et cetera. And then when we think about health score, it's more, okay, are they utilizing the product? Are they getting value? Now, that said, both of those things are incredibly important. When we think of a health score, or, today, or if I'm looking at a customer, I want to understand, hey, all of those things matter, right? It's not just utilization. We know that usage in and of itself does not equal value. I mean, if you haven't figured that out, then, newsflash, it does not equal value. I've seen a lot of customers use other platforms and various platforms and then churn the day that, they stop using it. So,
unless you're procurement, and then that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, true. Okay. Good point. But, the thing that is interesting is, so we know usage doesn't equal value, but understanding the trends of usage and understanding utilization, and there's a pretty big distinction between the two. I mean, are they utilizing your product to get to the value that they need? And is that laddering up to ultimately the reason why they bought your product? And so if we're able to understand value realization, and we're able to see trends, even specific aspects of your product usage, features, functions, things like that are high value add, and then when we think about the benefit of AI, and more specifically predictive analytics, that starts getting into looking at historical trends and seeing, hey, what are things that determine whether or not a customer is, successful and renewing, or, downgrading or churning or expanding, right? So like, we can now take an inordinate amount of data and historical information and map that forward to give us the predictive view that we need to understand how we can direct our teams and what to focus on as it relates to, features and functions, and any particular alerts, or, I love the growth aspect of it, because it then allows us to say, okay, well, from that standpoint, what can we do, or how can we drive additional growth by, encouraging either use of certain aspects of the product, or, aspects of that. So, Travis, what are your thoughts on the difference between the two?
Yeah, no, I actually didn't really have a definition of the difference between the two, but I like what you had mentioned. I think that the challenge for a lot of customers is making those predictive health scores specific to their business and their type of business. So if you have if you're a healthcare company, or a healthcare manufacturing company selling into hospitals, your health score in utilization of your product might look very different than if you're like Altify selling software into sales organizations. And so being able to pivot, I think that there are foundational principles that are going to be consistent across every industry, regardless of the selling motion and how you sell into those organizations. But if you can tweak it just a little bit to be specific to the way that your organization sells, or even the way that the customer buys from you, then it makes it that much smarter and that much better. I think that's the only thing that I would really add. I really like the way that you frame that up.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think the other opportunity that I see, we talked a little bit about, customers being happy because they're seeing the value, they're achieving outcomes. Oftentimes when you look at a health score, there's some level of input of, a feeling. You work with a customer for a while, there's that sentiment. What I see really exciting when you look at AI coming into the picture is that is able to look across a vast data set and spot what the human eye can't, right? We might get that spidey sense or a feeling, but when you're able to look at signals from sentiment across call recordings or emails, calendar invites, canceled invites that don't get rebooked,
Right.
That voice of customer input, how many support tickets are being filed. You talked about utilization or usage, Chris, marry that with how many support tickets are being filed. Are they being answered quickly? Are they satisfied in that? How multi-threaded are you? So I think that allows us to get to that more that deeper understanding, get to the predictive aspect. So I think it's a really exciting time that we're in, as we're evaluating what's possible in today's environment.
Yeah, and I would love to throw in things like understanding the personas that my CS team is interacting with. Are they interacting with, because to your point about Gartner, I think that they also said that renewal, somewhere in the renewal landscape, it's about 13 people now that are involved in enterprise renewals. And man, like if you're not engaged with the right personas across that group of 13, then that's a really big risk. If you don't have, to the point that Chris was making earlier, if you don't have if you're not aligned to the customer's goals, which will help them realize the value, and then that's a big risk. If you don't have a high activity level with some of your enterprise customers, or you don't have an executive sponsorship program in place, and your execs aren't meeting with their execs, which means ultimately that a competitor's exec could come in and connect with that exec and offer a sweetheart deal, and before you know it, you're out on the street. I mean, there's a lot of different components that can go into that predictive analysis that I'm excited about seeing in the future. I think that that's going to really help us identify risk early, and then if you can identify it early enough, then you can come up with a game plan. If you don't identify it until you start talking with procurement, then you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, you're a little behind.
And
it is interesting because we have a new product called Unison, which is AI based, churn prediction analytics kind of, and gives us incredible insights. And so we've been, obviously using that ourselves. And I was looking at a customer account the other day that I had multiple kind of negative interactions that were flagged in communication with support. And then one that was a call log that was with a CSM, that the CSM didn't necessarily pick up on the negative sentiment. And so, to be able to look across, as Karen kind of said, as a leader, to look at a customer and say, hey, I've got inputs that are coming in from multiple places, and I'm able to better understand kind of what the landscape is of not only the people that we're engaging with, but how do they feel in like, for example, I mean, the sentiment of somebody's text in a ticket is incredibly cool, right? To be able to go, okay, they're getting irritated. You can see it in the thread. Is a support agent going to pick up on that? No, they're banging out. So they're trying to answer tickets, and so the level of visibility that we have in some of these things is really, really increasing, which is going to, as we fine tune that and we start understanding more clearly, what does this mean? And, Karen, you mentioned about like tickets, honestly, I would say the thing that concerns me more about a volume of tickets is no tickets, right? If they're not submitting any tickets, guess what? You should have an alarm bell going off for sure, because that's always the case. So anyway.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one. Well, let's move on from AI. We've checked the box. It's 2025. Got to have AI in your.
Got to have AI in here somewhere.
No, but in all seriousness, we talked a little bit in the true or false section about expansion beginning before the sale or before the renewal, and we've also touched on how it helps to know where you're going, what you're trying to help your customers achieve throughout the course of their engagement with you. So Travis, this one's for you. Helps to have that kind of joint roadmap, if you will. So can you share a little bit about how you see joint account plans setting teams up for success, especially when, you mentioned everybody's selling? How do you help create these guardrails and clarity?
Yeah, we do this for all of our customers globally, right? So we do this, and we do this at scale. This is one of probably the most important things when it comes to account planning. Generally, when people come to us for account planning, they're coming to us because they have a pipeline issue. They're trying to create more pipeline. You win deals inside your own accounts 50% faster than you do with deals outside. If you're going after a new logo, you generally have larger deals when you're selling internally. Or inside your customers. So there's a lot of reasons to focus on it. And so people come to us all the time and they're saying, we have a pipeline issue. And the answer to that is very often really good account planning, where you can understand the buying centers and the business units of some of your larger galactic accounts, or if you're working a territory, understanding the white space in your territory and ultimately qualifying some, of your white space in or out, and then going after it. But what people sleep on all the time is that the account planning experience, if done really well, the account plan itself should be in a collaboration hub for the revenue team. And I call them a revenue team because, like I was saying, everybody sells. And that includes finance, marketing, it includes solution engineers, solution architects. They should all be involved in the account planning process. A lot of them, particularly if they're touching the customer, a lot of them are engaging with the customer in different ways than a CS is doing it, or an AE, or even a sales leader, or a customer success leader. They're engaging with the customer in different ways, and they're uncovering nuggets of information that are critical, not just to the health of the customer, but also to the potential expansion of that customer. And then it becomes at least this is part of what we teach anyway, it becomes how do you facilitate getting the best insights out of the revenue team as much as possible? Because there's the technology component where, you do want everybody to have access to it and to get visibility into it. But there's also a review process that is, if done well, is a collaborative experience for the whole team, where everybody that's engaged with the account has the opportunity to put forward their ideas, to identify gaps that you might have in a plan, and to make recommendations on how to fill those gaps. And so it becomes a bit of a cultural cadence piece that's really critical to driving the success and expanding within those accounts. But ultimately, that account planning process should be a collaboration hub for the whole revenue team to go to. And then cadence becomes really critical to making sure that it becomes a part of the culture.
Yeah. Can I double click on that cadence? Do you have a recommendation, especially when it comes to getting those cross-functional partners involved with a point of view? I mean, I see it myself, leading marketing. Our team might be engaged with an account in a different function or in a different way because we're collaborating on events or content together. And that's a critical piece of information that maybe the sales or CS team may have. So how often should should the joint revenue team really be looking at these account plans?
Yeah, so we actually recommend that you're doing it bi-weekly. So you do have the larger reviews of what's our strategy for the account going to be. And at a minimum for your galactic, your top 20, 30 accounts, that should be biannually. But you should be having revenue team meetings every at least 2 weeks to talk about the objectives of the account and then the actions and who owns those actions, so that we're constantly engaging, we're checking off things that we've done, we're able to communicate our value back to the customer, and we're able to actually articulate the value that we're bringing to the customer. All of those things are important. And if you're not doing it at a minimum bi-weekly for your largest accounts, then I think that I think that you're missing a really big opportunity to drive value with the customer.
That's a great recommendation. Also, I just heard you say twice now, galactic accounts. I love that. I want to steal that and bring that back. That's definitely creates a lot more excitement and energy
some people
around.
Have key accounts. Some people have tier 1 accounts. Some people have, but when you say galactic, everybody's like, oh yeah.
I'm listening.
Amazon and GE and Johnson Controls and Honeywell, I got it.
They're galactic. Yeah.
That's awesome.
For sure.
Well, so, okay, that's a great recommendation for account plan. Chris, I'm going to throw to you now because you've touched on value plans, and share a little bit about how a joint value plan can set customers up for success and how that fits into the bigger picture of that overall account plan.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the things that you said, Travis, that kind of resonated is this is, and you called it a collaboration hub, right? And so when we think of that account plan as the central location of all things on the account, that's it, right? Like that, and that to me, it really resonates with the fact that it's like, okay, everybody's going to be kind of around the account. As we think about customer-led growth, we're all surrounding the account. So we're all part of that account plan and all a part of the account planning. And like you said, having biweekly meetings, I think is amazing. And I love the recommendation, and it also holds a level of accountability. So, as we all know, if you get too far out from a given task, the level of, response to that is going to wane. And so, that holds an insane amount of accountability to people working within that account plan. So, as Karen mentioned, we love to think about value plans, or, often called success plans, which ultimately are, if we identify what is the reason why somebody purchased the product in the first place, and we have that as an identified goal or an outcome, and we understand what the measurement is, what is the KPI that we're working to achieve, then that becomes almost the North Star of what we do and how we kind of drive these plans towards. Now, there's always going to be little tasks and things that the customers are going to be wanting us to do. But the question, and honestly, the hard part of being a success manager these days is wrangling the customer in to make sure that all of those little things that they're wanting to work on and are saying incredibly important to them are actually mapping or laddering up to that ultimate, goal or objective, right? And that in and of itself, to me, is really what a success plan is. And that, in my view, it is a part of the overall account plan, right? So if we have a value plan or a success plan that's a core component of that overall account plan, now we're looking at, on that biweekly cadence for our galactic accounts, we're able to kind of make sure that, hey, okay, we are working towards those value measures. They're asking for all of these things, which we're working on, because they all can be, directly tied to ultimately achieving that value measure that we're working towards. And then we also, kind of going back to, the account health, versus, our overall customer health score, that allows us to also make the connective dots between, okay, are we aligned at the right spot? Do we have the right people? Are we identifying potential white space? Did we see something, in a recent earnings call that's going to create a problem? Do we have better insight into the direction we're going? And then how do all of those then filter down into that value plan or that success plan that we're ultimately kind of driving with the business owner? So
you just jarred a thought, and I just want to say it out loud real quick.
Yeah.
So the value plan and the success plan, or success plan, we live and breathe that concept internally. It's something that we have to do very often. And just maybe some advice for anybody who is a CS person listening in. If you ask the person, your contact at the customer, what's the goal for the relationship that you're having with them, for your product with their organization. And they come back and they basically say, like, oh, our goal is to have better customer success programs or better sales methodology programs. You are talking to the wrong person. They have no idea what the goals are. And so if it's not time bound and there's not a percentage associated to it, like Chris, Karen, you and I, we all have goals, and there's a specific time frame and there's a specific percentage that are connected to those. And anything that doesn't support me hitting that number or me hitting those percentages, I don't care about.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't connected what you do with one of those percentages or those goals of the senior executive who ultimately owns the budget of your product, I would say that's a really big risk, and you should figure out a way to get around that.
Yeah, great call out.
100%. I mean, just to even oversimplify it, if we're talking about tying this back to business goals at the end of the day, the executive team, the board is going to care, are you saving money? Are you making money? And there are specific, measurable, time-bound, like you talked about, goals that can help ensure that the team's getting to the targets. Yep. So this has been an incredible discussion. I'm going to wrap us up with one more question, because we've got some great engagement from the audience, and I want to make sure that we get to their questions. So before we close things out, we're in Q1 of 2025, and we've been talking about substantial shifts happening in businesses to drive sustainable customer-led growth. How do you focus on your install base, and what does that relationship look like across account management, sales, and CS teams to deliver value, meaningful attainment of your customers' business outcomes so that your companies can grow, right? So let's take the kind of reflection inward to your own teams, your own organizations. And I'd love to just wrap up by let's project to the end of the year. Can you name one thing that you expect your teams to achieve or pivot on by the end of the year to really embrace this notion of driving growth and expansion through the customer base? Bonus points if you have a time-bound percentage, measurable, specific.
I do have that, but I'm not going to make it public knowledge, because then we'll start getting our inboxes full of people tying their products to my goals, and I don't know if I do that right now. However, I mean, for us, and I think that we're humans and we get easily distracted by cool, shiny things. And the reality is there are a handful of really important concepts that every person in my organization needs to have down packed. There's kind of maybe 4 or 5 foundational pillars. You got to know your customer really well, do your research. You have to understand the people at that organization, decision makers, who supports us, who doesn't support us, who might be selling against us, who might be selling for us. You have to understand their goals. So we were just talking about, understand their goals, their pressures, the initiatives they have going on, obstacles to those initiatives, how our solutions ultimately align to those. Once you've done those 3 things, you can understand your white space. Once you understand your white space, you can qualify and focus on where you're going to spend time to try to expand. And then once you understand where you're going to try to expand, then you set a plan. You set objectives and actions to try to drive that. And then the whole team will support you. So you got to be able to do those 5 things. And we do that on repeat throughout the whole year.
Awesome. Chris,
So yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm going to take it back a notch, because to me, the thing that I'm looking at is we've kind of gone, we're going through a transformation internally on this, as we speak. And so as I think of, my goal for the end of the year, and this may sound like a low bar, but I think it's an important one, is just alignment across the teams, right? Like making sure that not only do we just have clear, lines of engagement, but that we improve the interlock between, especially sales and CS, but sales and CS and marketing and product, and make sure that we're, in an efficient motion, right? And something that I've noticed is if you have friction there, then you're going to create friction with your customer, right? And the goal is to reduce as much friction as we can across the board, so that way the customer experience is not only good and efficient, but they understand who they're going to, and they see that we're operating as a machine, right? So as we continue to work through, our account plans, which is our hub of information, as we've said, and then kind of continue to push towards the value realization, aspect of that, I think it's just going to be critical. So as I think, towards the end of the year, quite frankly, the goal is just even more tight. More tight, is that a good use of the language? Sure. Okay. But just between internal organizations to create a frictionless experience for the customer. So
Love it.
I love that. Yeah. Alignment between internal teams, alignment to the customer's goals, why they bought your product or service in the first place. First step to driving customer-led growth. So I love that. Let's now transition into some questions from the audience. And I think just to talk about that alignment, and Travis, maybe keying into what you said about everyone should be selling. Question came in from the audience. Do you think it's easier to teach a CS person how to do sales, or a salesperson how to do CS?
Ooh.
Hot topic.
It depends.
Classic. Okay.
Depends on the person.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, it is hard. Selling is hard, and quite frankly, I prefer to go from sales to CS. That's just a personal preference, and the reason is, when you've gone through sales, even if you haven't been wildly successful, and this is partially because of the industry that we sell into and work in, but I want somebody who has the empathy, that understands the struggle, that like what happens when you don't hit your goal. Like, I want somebody who knows what it's like to have their name put up on a leaderboard and it's down at the bottom, and what that feels like. That empathy helps us when we are interacting with our sellers and with our customers. It helps us understand that what we're supplying is something that's very difficult to overcome. And I want that empathy. And I think that the mindset of us as a salesperson is important. So I think that it's probably easier to go from sales to CS than it is from CS to sales, although I think that is changing rapidly.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I would say that I would agree with you. I mean, it feels like a lot of the CS, I've been in the space for a while. A lot of the CSMs I've worked with just do not have the DNA when it comes to negotiating, for example. And I mean, there is something unique about that. Now, I would say that equally, there are certainly, I've had people that I've worked with on the sales front that would just be awful CSMs. So, I like you said, it kind of does depend. But I would agree with you that generally speaking, the move from sales or an executive account management team into a CS team seems to be a little bit lower of a hurdle. So,
okay. Well, let's stay on this team topic. We had a question from Sarah. It says, curious about your perspective on QAing sales and customer success teams based on customer health scores or voice of customer trends. So put another way, are you auditing your teams and reviewing them based on those health scores or VOC trends?
Inspect what you expect. Is that the stay phrase?
If you use any of the conversational intelligence AI tools that are out there, and you get to jump in and take a look and see how your CS organization is interacting with the customers, sometimes it can be pretty eye-opening. So yes, inspect what you expect.
I think the other thing on this too, which is important, is we know that we're going to have individual conversations between, sales and the customer, CS and the customer. But if we have a good lockstep partnership, there is a sense of check there, kind of a checks and balances on what that is. Because if you've got a CSM that is, just say highly optimistic, the sales rep may be hearing something on those calls that is different, just like I've got sales reps that are like, oh yeah, I piped this, big expansion deal. And the CSM's like, that is not happening. Right. So you kind of look at that and you go, okay, great. That's where, working as a team that's incredibly efficient is going to keep greater consistency, within what you're doing in the organization. So yeah, I agree with you. AI sentiment certainly will give you a good point. And, we have to be looking at, those chorus or gong calls. We need to be understanding kind of what's happening with some of those, but at the same time, having a partnership and a joint relationship with the customer will help keep that in check as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just another point is we have finite resources, and so maybe to answer the question directly, the segmentation that a health score provides among your account base is pretty important when you're trying to figure out where to spend time and resource. And so, like any technology, you got to have a little bit of a gut check with what you're getting back. The health scores are getting stronger and stronger. The Catalyst health scores that we use, very strong, really good indicator. I'd like to see more of them being bright green across my teams, but that's a place that you kind of have to start, just because we don't have the resources to do everything for everybody. And so it's very valuable to do it that way. Yes.
All right. Well, that's a good segue into the next question. It has to do a little bit with resourcing and capacity. So Mariah asked, wanted to know a little bit about your perspective on the number of customers that a CSM should manage if the CSM is in a position to have a role in upsell, cross-sell, expansion.
Yeah, good question.
I can say,
you have a recommendation on, I'm sure it varies if we're
depends. Yeah.
the galactic segment, but maybe just some rough rules of thumb and what you see.
What I've seen it vary pretty significantly depending on, your product, your business, who you're selling to, those kind of things. Right. So one of the things that I've seen as a great rule of thumb on this is to kind of work backwards into what you're expecting the engagement model to be for your CSM. So if you said, hey, I'm expecting my CSM to have X number of meetings with this customer on a biweekly basis or on a weekly basis. And, and if you're looking at how mature is your product, how long have you been in the market? How flexible is it? Or is it something that's fairly rigid that you can kind of more contain what it is that they're wanting to do with the product? So that would be the first step, is to, get in a true assessment of the level of effort it's going to take for them to be able to really, engage with your customer, and then what your expectations are as it relates to the engagement. So, something, Travis, you mentioned just a second ago, which we could spend a whole another hour on, which is, how do you segment your customers, right? What does the engagement model look like based on your galactic customers versus your, tier 2 customers, and then your long tail or digital customers, so as you get that segment, you'll start understanding better, okay, how much time do I want to invest in this segment with my resources? And then you can back into that equation. So if I know I have a CSM, I'm wanting to spend weekly calls with this galactic account, I can quickly do the math and understand, okay, well, I can only give them 10 accounts, or I can only give them 5 accounts because of the amount of time I'm expecting them to be spending with that given customer, right? So do the math kind of backwards to understand, what you should be expecting and how you can deploy your resources. And if there's a mismatch there, then either one of two things: you either got to get more resources, good luck with that these days, or you have to adjust your expectations on the engagement model, which typically people don't necessarily look at it through that lens. And then as you start unfolding, you're like, well, of course they can't do all these things. If they did everything I expected them to do, they'd be working 92 hours a week. So you kind of can work through that math. So
yeah, I'm on the same page. Exactly right. The only maybe thing that I would add to it is we try to blend the different kinds of customers with our CSMs, and we see that across the board with a lot of our customers as well, so that you have a handful that have growth potential, a handful that are never going to grow, and you operate those slightly differently. If you're somebody who has 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 accounts or more, like if you're in the telecom space, for example, and you have 300 or 400 accounts because it's all based off of location, then you're, as the CSM, going to have a pretty good sense for the customers that are really good ones and the ones that aren't. And then my suggestion would be to make a plan around your top 10 or 15 growth opportunities. And that's where you focus your time and effort. I completely agree with what Chris said. You segment your accounts and your CS based on experience and expertise, and you have to manage how much you expect an individual person can actually do in the course of a day, week, or month.
Yeah, it's a great call out.
That's great. All right, we've got kind of maybe related to this. It's a hot topic, but just want to dig into what we were talking about. So galactic accounts, and Travis, you mentioned something really interesting around segmentation if you're looking at them on growth potential. So are you thinking about galactic accounts because they are at a certain ARR or dollar amount? Is it because they're in a growth segment and they have huge growth potential? Just maybe if you could double click on that for Steve, who asked in the chat.
Yeah, so the galactic accounts, I liken them to Darth Vader and the Star Wars galactic.
This is what we were waiting for. All right.
All right, so everybody got a little bit of a sneak peek behind the curtains here for me. Yes, I love Star Wars. But beyond that, yeah, but the galactic accounts are the ones that I see it happen very differently across different customers. And I think a part of it has to do with the maturity of the industry that they're in. But for a lot of the customers, those galactic accounts are the ones that probably aren't going to grow, but are massive. They're not going to grow that much, but they're really big. They take a lot of resource. They have high expectations. They have a lot of buying power. Those tend to have to get managed slightly different. And then your next segment might be the potential that it's a really strong, good logo and you have a foothold in and you want to grow those accounts. You might consider those as galactic accounts as well. Those are the accounts where the AE and the CS are really going to have to cooperate and work together. And so there might be a little bit more of the kind of collaboration hub analogy that we gave earlier on those kinds of accounts than there would be on a galactic account, at least across the revenue team. I see those logos as being important, and I see the dollar threshold as being really important when I consider who's going to fit that bill and who's not.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I think you kind of bring up a point just about segmentation, right? Whether you call it galactic or if you're into, I don't know, hobbits or something, I don't know what you would call it there. But I guess the point is, as we think about how we segment our customers, we need to look at it through a mindset of, okay, yeah, these are the top ones that are going to take a lot of time, effort, energy. Maybe they have a large growth potential, maybe not, but maybe they have a large impact if they go away. So there's a level of protection that we need to do on those accounts. But then, if you have another, in your expectations on that tier of accounts could be one thing, where when you get into your second tier of accounts, maybe those are high growth accounts, right? Call them what you want, but at the end of the day, if you have clear indications of what those segmentations, what those tiers are, and then more importantly, what are your expectations as it relates to your CSM and your sales teams as they grow and kind of manage those accounts. So,
all right. Well, I've got one last question for you. I feel like this one brings us full circle. When the three of us got together, we did a little prep conversation. We found ourselves talking about life in the ER. I wrote a little post about it. Whether you're married to an ER doctor, you watch one on TV, or you feel like you're playing one in your day job because you're constantly rushing after an emergency. This question comes from Cassandra. How do you get a customer who's not 100% satisfied to give you another chance and buy again? It's the classic, how do you get the renewal, or how do you save an account question? So Travis, I'll go to you first.
So married to an ER doctor, and it doesn't matter what I say after this answer the question, nothing that I say or do is as important. And so I will get shut down all the time. My job is not nearly as important. It's a part of the thing that you just have to live with when you're married to somebody like that. That being said, so how do you get back into the customer? It's really hard if you're not talking to the right people. So you might have been booted because you were working with the wrong people. You were working with either gatekeepers or people who were just project managers, as opposed to somebody making the decision. And so in my estimation, the best way to get back in with a customer, or if they're about to leave you, the best way to save the account is to get an exec to exec conversation going, where you're talking about goals, you're talking about the things that move the needle for the customer. You're hyper focused on helping the customer and not saving the deal. That's when you can start to move things. Sometimes you also just have to qualify out and say, you know what, it was a bad fit to begin with. But anyway, that's my suggestion, is you need to go high.
Yeah. I'll jump in on that, because you said something that I would lean into as well, which is, honestly, there's a level of transparency that's required here. I mean, first of all, you absolutely have to be at the right level. But then the second thing is, okay, let's acknowledge, where you're at, where you missed it, where you need to go. If you have a clear understanding of what their goals are, then you can say, listen, we missed the mark. I'm going to fall on the sword, but we're also, this is how we can help you. And you have a clear plan of what it is to get to right track that, with the right person. So once you have that, then it allows you to earn the respect or earn the opportunity to jump back in and get that second shot. Again, a lot of times it's a little bit of a Hail Mary, as we like to say, but if you can come in with the right plan, if you're talking with the right level, and if you're acknowledging, where you missed it, then at least you can start building that trust that might afford you that second chance. So,
yep. Well said.
Great points to end on. Thank you both. This was fun. Thank you to our audience for attending. Hopefully everyone got some great tips to bring back to their team. Everyone should be selling that value, how you're helping your customers achieve results, so you can focus on winning together, which is what brought us here today. So everyone that attended should receive a recording of today's discussion. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about Travis's organization, you can visit uplandsoftware.com/Altify, ALTIFY. Did I spell that right?
Yep.
Or if you want to learn more about Totango, you can find us at Totango.com. See, I didn't get the memo about the branded vest, but maybe next time. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Chris. And thanks to everyone for joining.
Thanks, everybody.